Thank you so much and welcome to the simultaneous special session to regional crisis management mechanisms. I hope you've found the conversations and deliberations at the dialogue so far interesting and productive, and I am sure this session will be no different. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by such an esteemed panelist, but before I introduce my panelists and hand the floor over to them for them to make remarks, just a quick few housekeeping notes and instructions. First, just a reminder to everyone that the conversations in this room are on the record. There will be audio and video available, and it will be recorded, just so you're aware. In terms of delegates seated around the table, for the use of microphone, when you want to use your microphone to ask a question, please insert your badge into the slot on the right-hand side of the unit. You'll be logged into the microphone, and it will display your name on screen. If you want to ask a question, click on it. The red will mean you're in the queue. It'll open up in my list, and when I call on you and the mic will be on, it'll turn to green. We've done this a few times at the plenary, so hopefully people would remember. But with that, let me turn to the panel today that we have to talk about crisis management mechanisms and its impact in Asia Pacific and what we are seeing today. I will start from my right with Minister Stephanie Beck, who is the Deputy Minister of National Defense of Canada. To my right is Dr. Baron Wanga, Secretary General of Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. To my left is General Shahir Shamshad Mirza, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, Pakistan Armed Forces. And to my extreme left is Major General Jone Lugavatu Kaluniwai, Commander, Republic of Fiji Military Forces. I will ask the speakers to begin with opening remarks and scene setting and their thoughts on the topic for about 5 minutes. I do apologize, we are on a strict time limit in terms of that so that we can leave enough room for conversation and Q&A. And once we have heard from our speakers, I will open up the floor for question and answer, and we'll go for them. With that, let me turn to Minister Beck. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation from IISS to speak today to this group with this very interesting challenge that we have in front of us. And I'm speaking to you now as Canada is grappling with another crisis at home, which is wildfires. Again, unfortunately, now practically an annual event, and emergency services, including members of the Canadian Armed Forces, are deployed in Western Canada, organizing the evacuation of tens of thousands of people in 3 different provinces. And this just reinforces that in times of crisis, it's better if we're managing together. If we're managing as multiple countries, as different groups, as we're mobilizing our resources for the common good. Really what we need to do, though, is focus on crisis prevention. I'm not really going to speak about that today in my opening remarks, but it'd be useful I think, to have that as part of the conversation so as to avoid actually having to manage the number of crises that are coming our way. So guiding our populations through best practices, providing advice and reassurance and training, in fact, to prevent crises as the possibilities arise. And we unfortunately have lots of experience in responding to natural disasters, both at home and in the Indo-Pacific. And of course, this region is particularly prone to natural disasters, unfortunately. And we know firsthand the value of having reliable partners when a crisis occurs. Our own defense policy, which is our North Strong and Free, and our Indo-Pacific strategy, both support our engagement with regional Indo-Pacific partners, addressing traditional and non-traditional transnational challenges that threaten regional stability. And security challenges, risks, and crises that we're all dealing with are best dealt with collectively through dialogue to ensure prosperity and peace across the region. That really is the ultimate goal for all of us. And I want to stress that what happens in Indo-Pacific shapes Canada's future too. Our national security, economy, democratic values, and the environment We have nearly 1/6 of the Canadian population originates from the Indo-Pacific region, myself included, for that matter, and our biggest trading partners are here in the region as well. And crisis management is only part and parcel of this relationship that we have. And so given the current wildfire situation, I'm going to talk mostly about that kind of crisis management, although I think my colleagues are going to be speaking much more about traditional security crisis management. And climate change is really our biggest threat in this regard. And I would include in the north of Canada, where the planet is warming even faster than in the rest of the world. And already today, we only need to scan the headlines to see the devastating effects on people's lives and livelihoods. And we know that this is only going to become more acute in the coming decades. Climate change is amplifying existing vulnerabilities. Infrastructure, roads, rails, telecommunications will be particularly affected. I would note that as the climate warms in the north of Canada, we literally cannot build roads in winter anymore. At this time of year, normally there are ice roads, but those do not exist when the climate is warmer, and therefore more and more communities in our remote areas are becoming only accessible by air, which leads to a whole set of other challenges, of course. And we need to have the tools and systems in place to build resiliency across our societies and the mechanisms to manage emergencies. This includes information. In a crisis, mis- and disinformation spread rapidly, so we need to ensure there are trusted sources of information for all of our populations that are available even when there are no telecommunications and when electricity is out. The Canadian Armed Forces responses to domestic natural disasters have pretty much doubled every 5 years since 2010. So we know firsthand that the situation is getting worse. So our operations support communities all across the country in complement with provincial and local resources. So we deploy military personnel, equipment, logistics, and planning support. Right now we have upwards of 15 aircraft deployed to the provinces of Manitoba and Saskatchewan to help evacuate people in remote communities. And in 2023, we deployed over 2,000 personnel, evacuated hundreds of civilians, transported 285,000 pounds of supplies in a really intense wildfire season. And that wasn't really enough. And so we turned to friends and allies to support us in this. And in fact, over 3,700 foreign firefighters traveled to Canada to help battle the historic fires, including 140 South Koreans. The first ever team sent from there to Canada to help battle these blazes. We send our own firefighters outside Canada as well, and other first responders, including regularly to the United States, just to our south. To quote the lead Korean firefighter, "It's the same forest. We should keep the forest. That means a promise to the future, a promise to the globe, and that's what friends do." Since 2003, Canada has been a proud observer of the 80mm Plus Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief Expert Working Group, and we've really welcomed this opportunity to learn about regional crisis response mechanisms from many of the partners in this room. And by observing the working groups where practical cooperation takes place, we build interoperability, we learn from ASEAN member states, and we contribute the knowledge that we have as well. And we look forward to continuing that in the next cycle, building and sharing expertise with our partners. We will always uphold international law that governs conduct between nations in the deployments that we make to assist. We will always be doing this in partnership with the affected country's specific needs. Ask first, find out what is necessary, and then go in to assist, and always in coordination with the United Nations or other international relief organizations. Climate-related disasters test our resilience, and we deeply respect and can learn from arrangements such as the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response. This resilience is partly why Canada is increasing our defense presence and level of engagement in the Indo-Pacific as part of Operation Horizon. And we believe these efforts will help boost our collective resistance and interoperability. So unfortunately, so much more work together and strengthening our relations with partners will make a difference in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Let me turn to you, Secretary General Wonka.
Thank you, Moderator. Excellencies, Honourable Ministers, Chiefs of Defence Forces from around the Asia-Pacific region, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Kamawiramo, Bulavinaka, and warm Pacific greetings to you all. It is a privilege to join you at this important session on regional crisis management mechanisms. As Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum, I bring a perspective from a region where the global tide of tension and conflict does not stop at our shores. While we are geographically distant from some global flashpoints, their impacts are deeply felt, diverting attention and reshaping priorities and emboldening instability. We see clearly how rising great power competition and global conflicts such as the Russian-Ukraine war and tensions in the Middle East have spillover effects that challenge our collective peace and security. Closer to home, tensions in the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and the Korean Peninsula have increased the risk of miscalculation. These developments demand urgent, coordinated responses to avoid escalation. And yet, for the Pacific Islands Forum, the greatest long-term security threat remains climate change. It is a crisis multiplier, deepening existing vulnerabilities and placing additional strain on our communities and institutions. Our region has long valued peace, dialogue, and cooperation. The Pacific Islands Forum, along with regional institutions like ASEAN, has long served as the backbone of stability in our region. However, we must acknowledge that heightened great power competition and evolving regional threat perceptions are placing unprecedented strain on these mechanisms. Our crisis management mechanisms must remain robust and effective in the face of growing geopolitical uncertainties. This involves reinforcing existing frameworks and innovating new approaches that can adapt to the dynamic security landscape. Effective crisis management begins with prevention. It requires, one, promoting inclusive and peaceful engagement, and two, enhancing communication channels for early warning and timely information sharing. Three, building trust through dialogue and joint activities. Four, fostering regional cooperation for coordinated responses. And fifth, supporting regional institutions like the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat and ASEAN. In our Blue Pacific region, we have unique initiatives that drive our approach to regional crisis management. The Bikitawa Declaration, endorsed by Pacific leaders back in 2000, provides a framework for coordinating responses to regional crisis, emphasizing good governance, democratic processes, and the protection of indigenous rights and cultural values. The Bikitawa Declaration has been invoked several times to address crises, including regional peacekeeping operations in the Solomon Islands and the region's response to COVID-19. Pacific Islands Forum leaders have also mandated the development of an Ocean of Peace Declaration. This visionary initiative seeks to embed peace as a fundamental pillar or regional policy and strategy. It reflects our region's enduring commitment to upholding and strengthening international peace and security. The declaration will promote core principles such as respect for sovereignty, the peaceful resolution of conflicts, and enhanced regional cooperation against transboundary threats, including drug-related crimes and the impacts of climate change. These initiatives reflect the Pacific's proactive, value-driven approach to crisis management. They demonstrate our collective commitment to resolving tensions through dialogue and cooperation, and to foster a stable, peaceful, and secure regional environment for all. As we share ideas today, let us remember that our purpose is collective: to safeguard peace, prevent conflict, and protect the dignity of all our peoples in our beloved region. Let us reaffirm our commitment to strengthen regional crisis management mechanisms through dialogue, innovation, and solidarity. Together, we can ensure a stable and peaceful future for our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. General Mirza, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Darshana. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by expressing gratitude to IISS for providing me an opportunity to join the panel of esteemed speakers to talk today. It is a privilege to speak on the critical subject of crisis management mechanisms in the Asia Pacific, a region of immense promise, yet undeniable peril. The Asia Pacific has become the geopolitical cockpit of the 21st century. Its trajectories will shape the security architecture, not only for this region, but of the world. Yet if we are candid, we must admit that crisis management mechanisms today remain somewhat fragile, reactive, and unevenly institutionalized. Ladies and gentlemen, to lay the foundation, let me offer 8 salient observations from Pakistan's perspective as a stakeholder in regional and global stability. First, strategic understanding must precede crisis management. Mechanisms cannot function in a vacuum of trust or amid systemic asymmetries. Durable crisis management requires a foundation of mutual restraint, recognition of red lines, and equilibrium, not dominance. Second, inclusion is not optional. No framework can succeed if key stakeholders are marginalized or if cooperative structures serve as instruments of containment. Stability must be participatory. Third, ad hoc responses are inadequate. We need institutionalized protocols, hotlines, pre-agreed deconfliction procedures, and joint crisis management exercises that remove ambiguity when the escalation threatens. Fourth, crisis prevention is better than crisis fighting. Suppressed disputes, whether territorial or ideological, cannot be indefinitely managed. Durable mechanisms must include pathways of fair and peaceful dispute resolution. I shall dwell on this a little later. Excuse me. Fifth, Strategic communication matters. Misconception, narrative warfare, and information distortion are the oxygen for escalation. We must disarm not only militarily, but rhetorically. Sixth, emerging technologies proliferate faster than our doctrines evolve. AI-enabled targeting, cyber disruptions, real-time battlefield surveillance compress the decision space. Our mechanisms should accommodate this new reality. Seventh, power and interests, not morality or principles, now reign supreme. Structures holding the modern state system are losing vitality. Use of force with impunity is pervasive. The custodians of liberal world have themselves jettisoned the much cherished values of state sovereignty, territorial integrity, human rights, international law, and justice. Multilateralism is gradually giving way to a rather myopic minilateralism. Lastly, South Asia must not be left out of the Asia-Pacific stability conversations. It is home to two geographically contiguous nuclear powers, an unresolved territorial dispute of Kashmir, and the living memory of several crises that nearly spiraled out of control. Crisis management debate in the Asia-Pacific is incomplete without a serious focus on South Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now talk about challenges in the Asia-Pacific and South Asia. First, the Asia-Pacific. Like all other regions in the world, Asia-Pacific has had its share of security challenges. Yet, at the same time, I view Asia-Pacific as a role model of regional growth, taking maximum advantage of globalization and its spin-offs. The region is intricately connected in multiple domains like politics, economics, and people-to-people connection. Here, I would like to proffer 4 observations. Firstly, Asia-Pacific today appears to be descending into an extended era of great power contestation and strategic uncertainty. Increasing militarization and juxtaposition of regionalized political issues into great power play have increased the chances of the region being the next frontier of contestation. Secondly, since the end of World War II, Asia-Pacific has largely been guided by extra-regional powers and consequently an institutional security architecture organic to the region itself with crisis oversight and management structures are missing, exactly when they are direly needed. Thirdly, it is inevitable to recognize the rise of all great nations of Asia-Pacific who rightfully claim their own share of strategic significance and an independent voice in institutional mechanisms meant to manage their region. This implies that mechanisms transplanted into this region from outside the region will not have local respect and recognition. Finally, it is encouraging to see that the region is alive to its challenges and there are many ongoing efforts for expanding cooperation and increasing communication. I am very optimistic that with a constructive, cooperative, and an accommodative approach, the region will be able to emerge taller out of the impending crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, now I shall talk about South Asia, where a looming threat of a global scale resides. South Asian strategic outlook is shaped by competing interests of the global power play, complicated Iran-West relations, perpetual instability in Afghanistan, India-Pakistan-China equation, and the unresolved Kashmir dispute that remains at the core of India-Pakistan dyad, leading to regional instability. In the geostrategic realm, nuclearized South Asia presents a risk of strategic miscalculation of a global consequence. Nuclearization of South Asia was a watershed event, beyond which third-party mediation has emerged as a permanent feature of crisis management. Emboldening of India as a net security provider by the West and its ambition to become a regional hegemon is disincentivizing it to engage in conflict management options. Conflicts in South Asia, therefore, remain unaddressed due to weakened capacity and ineffectiveness of the multilateral frameworks, both international and regional. Ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly add that the recent escalation between India and Pakistan has once again underscored how regional crisis management frameworks remain hostage to countries' belligerence. As far as crisis management is concerned, the only functional bilateral communication that exists between the two countries is the Director General Military Operations Hotline, whereas the recent standoff amply underlines significance of maintaining open channels of communications to avert crisis as and when they erupt. In this context, I want to make 4 assertions. First, post-Pahalgam, the threshold of an escalatory war has come dangerously low, implying greater risk on both sides, just not in the disputed territory, but all of India and all of Pakistan. This is extremely detrimental to investments, trading, and development needs of 1.5 billion people of both countries. Secondly, in future, given the Indian policies and polity's extremist mindset, absence of a crisis management mechanism may not give enough time to the global powers to intervene and effect cessation of hostilities. They will be probably too late to avert damage and destruction. It'll just take a few minutes. Thirdly, the weaponization of water by holding Indus Water Treaty in abeyance is in total defiance of the international laws, since it is an existential threat for the people of Pakistan. If there is any effort to stop, divert, or delay the Pakistan's share of water, as clearly spelled out by our National Security Committee, it could be considered as an act of war. India, in violation of the UN Charter, carried out illegal and unjustified air and missile strikes targeting civilian infrastructure, including the places of worship, resulting into the loss of innocent civilian lives, including women and children. The assumption that Pakistan would not react to the violation of its sovereignty or territorial integrity actually lacks elementary strategic sense. Ladies and gentlemen, loss of innocent lives in Pahalgam, as well as India's aggression against Pakistan, which also killed innocent men, women, and children, are both equally condemnable. Pakistan has always proffered negotiated and diplomatic solutions and repeatedly offered full cooperation to India to work on all contentious issues. I'll just take 2 minutes going to the recommendations. Pakistan desires a peaceful coexistence with India based on mutual respect, sovereign equality, and most importantly, dignity and honor. Moving forward, 4 recommendations. In both Asia Pacific and South Asia, we need not have new mechanisms. We need to re-energize and strengthen existing bilateral, regional, and multilateral frameworks. Both Asia Pacific and South Asia need to take up the mantle of keeping global institutions relevant and effective. States need to communicate more often and more effectively. Finally, it has become imperative to move beyond conflict management towards conflict resolution. This will ensure sustainable peace and an assured crisis management. Finally, for an enduring peace in South Asia, an early resolution of Kashmir in line with the UN Security Council resolutions and as per the aspirations of people is essential. I believe that institutions have a solemn responsibility to promote strategic discipline, to preserve communication even amidst crisis. And then I would finally say that we seek a principled order, an order anchored in sovereign equality and restraint. In this, crisis management is not merely a set of tools, but a strategic ethic. I thank you.
Thank you, Major General Kaluniwai. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates and esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to address this special plenary to discuss the crisis management mechanisms in the Asia-Pacific region. In an era marked by complex and interconnected challenges, from geopolitical tensions to climate-related disasters, a comprehensive and collaborative approach to crisis management is essential. Fiji, strategically positioned in the heart of the Pacific, recognizes the urgent need to enhance crisis management capabilities, particularly given its vulnerabilities to climate change and the evolving regional dynamics. In 2013, the South Pacific Defense Ministers meeting, a ministerial forum for security and defense in the South Pacific, founded the Pacific Response Group Initiative with an aim to enhance our region's defense capabilities and response mechanisms that could help and support collective security and improve disaster preparedness in the Pacific Islands. The Pacific Response Group represents a significant step forward in enhancing crisis response capabilities within the Pacific Islands. This multinational military initiative, comprising members from Australia, Fiji, France, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and Tonga, aims to deepen cooperation and improve the responsiveness of Pacific militaries to natural disasters and other crises. The Pacific Response Group aligns directly with the principles of the Pacific Islands Forum Boer Declaration and the Bikitawa Declaration as well on regional security, which broadens the concept of security to include human security, environmental security, and transnational crime. It also operationalizes the goals of the Pacific Plan, which advocates for strengthened regional cooperation and integration. The Pacific Response Group is prioritizing several approaches that could be beneficial to broader Asia-Pacific crisis management mechanisms. And these include: one, focus on non-traditional security threats. We're recognizing the interconnected nature of security challenges in the region. The Pacific Response Group emphasizes collaboration on addressing issues like climate change and natural disasters. This aligns with the understanding that these non-traditional threats can exacerbate existing vulnerabilities and create new sources of instability. Second is regional inclusivity. The Pacific Response Group fosters inclusivity by involving Pacific Island nations in broader Asia-Pacific dialogues. This ensures that the perspectives of smaller states, who are often on the front lines of climate change and other crises, are taken into account. Third is capacity building and training programs, where the Pacific Response Group prioritizes defense cooperation opportunities by facilitating capacity building and training programs, which include exchanges between military personnel, joint exercises and drills to improve interoperability, and sharing expertise in areas like disaster response, peacekeeping, and also cybersecurity. The fourth is alignment with regional frameworks, where operations are discussed at meetings such as the Joint Heads of Pacific Security, indicating efforts to integrate it into the regional security architecture. To further enhance the effectiveness of crisis management mechanisms in the Asia-Pacific, the following considerations are proposed. Based from Fiji's dedication to regional peace and security and international peacekeeping commitments, is the Republic of Fiji Military Forces' multifaceted approach, which integrates peace-building, development, and humanitarian assistance. The RFMF goes beyond traditional military roles, actively contributing to reconciliation, restoration, and community development initiatives, thus demonstrating a holistic approach to national and regional security. Our focus is the critical intersection of peace-building, development, and humanitarian action. This approach recognizes that achieving sustainable peace requires addressing the root causes of conflict and fostering inclusive development, and not just by military means. The nexus of peace-building, development, and humanitarian action offers a powerful framework for more effective crisis management in today's complex world. By integrating these three pillars, we can move beyond short-term relief efforts to address the root causes of crisis and build sustainable solutions. Traditionally, humanitarian aid focuses on immediate relief. Development aims for long-term progress, and peace-building seeks to resolve conflict. However, these areas are deeply interconnected. Humanitarian crises often stem from underlying issues like poverty, inequality, and conflict. Development efforts can be undermined by instability and violence, and peace building requires addressing the socio-economic needs of affected communities. In conclusion, from Fiji's perspective, the development of the Pacific Response Group under the South Pacific Defense Ministers meeting offers a valuable model for enhancing regional crisis response capabilities. This initiative, integrated with the nexus of peace building, development, and humanitarian action, offers a promising pathway to more effective crisis management. By integrating these three pillars, we can address the root causes of crisis, build resilience, promote peace and stability, improve coordination, and increase the effectiveness of interventions. By prioritizing engagement with member states, consulting with regional partners, and developing clear operating frameworks, the Pacific Response Group can effectively contribute to regional stability and resilience. The integration of the Pacific Response Group into the broader Asia-Pacific crisis management landscape requires a comprehensive approach that addresses the complex challenges facing the region. Ultimately, the success of the Pacific Response Group will depend on its ability to foster cooperation, build trust, and promote shared responsibility among all stakeholders. As Fiji experience demonstrates, regional initiatives that prioritize collaboration and address interconnected challenges can make a significant contribution to crisis management. Thank you.
Thank you, Major General. Thank you to the panelists. I thought that was a great set of remarks and a perspective, a varied set of perspectives from tactical to strategic, really highlighting the complex process of crisis management and how that really works at a regional but also at a national level. I have a number of screens and people who would like to ask questions on my on the screen. I'll take maybe a round of 3 to begin with. As I call your name, please ask the question and identify the panelists if you have a specific question to a particular speaker or if it is for the panel generally. From the Young Leaders Program, Isabella Ong from Myanmar. The floor is yours.
My question is for Minister Bragg. Bonjour, Minister. Bienvenue à Singapore. I'm from Ontario, so it is great to see another Canadian face here. My question is on disaster response. After the devastating earthquake in Myanmar this year, Canada provided up to $9.75 million in humanitarian assistance. However, these funds were distributed through the UN, Red Cross, and other large international organizations. These organizations, unfortunately, have to work with the military regime to provide assistance to the affected communities. This is a regime that intentionally withholds all the aid from the worst affected community just because they are pro-democracy activity in these areas, on top of carrying out airstrikes in these disaster strikes area just a few days after the earthquake. So how will Canada ensure that future aid for Myanmar from Canada gets to those who needs it the most instead of being mishandled by the junta? Thank you very much.
From IISS, Julia Wu.
Thanks, Darshana. My question is to General Mirza. So, General, can you elaborate on the crisis management mechanisms between Pakistan and India? You mentioned that there's one hotline between DG military operations. How is that actually used, and how does it apply to cyber? Thank you.
And finally, from Indonesia, Rati.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. My question is towards all the panelists. So we agree that any changes to the status quo across the Taiwan Strait would influence countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Given that Taiwan is often, even always excluded from regional and multilateral dialogues, how can regional institutions such as ASEAN or, for example, the Pacific Island Forum be enforced for crisis management and prevention mechanism across the Taiwan Strait? Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps turn to you, Mr. Van.
Sure, I'll start. And I would say thank you for the question, and nice to see fellow Canadian. I think this is always a challenge. There are many parts of the world where we try and direct the assistance, and it doesn't always get exactly where we as the donor would like. Really, the best we can do is ensure that the receiving organizations are strong and well-connected and have the ability to deliver, with the understanding that it's not always going to be 100% certain. I think what is also really important to make sure that we're delivering the right solutions, the right equipment, the right food is knowing your audience, knowing what it is that they need precisely, and therefore that is the community that we're targeting, and we're knowing that what we're actually delivering is what they need.
General Mirza.
Thank you for this question. As I mentioned, that the only functional at the moment communication is the Director General Military Operations Hotline. First of all, how it works, there's a proper line laid between both countries. It's a landline which is laid, and on that, there's a communication on every Tuesday. On every Tuesday, the Director General Military Operations or their senior reps, they speak to each other regularly, and they exchange the issues, and they converse with each other. And in crisis, it is not only Tuesday, it is on occurrence, it can happen. At the tactical levels, of course, we are, deployed eyeball to eyeball along the line of control. So there are some mechanisms, an extension of this hotline, which is the hotline messaging and hotline telephone calls at the lower levels. This is the only crisis management mechanism available at the moment. Let me reiterate that there was a mechanism in 2007, 8, until up to 12, which was the composite dialogue mechanism. That composite dialogue mechanism would meet frequently on quarterly basis, and then every year, every second month, there would be a meeting, and that had 8 strands. That was peace and security, Kashmir, terrorism, water, and few other issues. So that has become dysfunctional since the time 2013, this present regime came into power. And apart from that, there used to be back channel diplomacy, track 2 mechanisms. All of these at the moment are not functional. Since 2013, we have been repeatedly urging the international community and to the Indians also to resort to these formal mechanisms of communication. As you saw, as you witnessed, that during the recent crisis, this was the only open channel available. But there has been a reluctance from the other side. Pakistan is open to have any number of mechanism channels because we believe that it's only dialogue and consultation and on the table that the issues can be resolved.
And I think the last question was to the whole panel on sort of Taiwan and crisis management across Taiwan Straits when Taiwan is excluded from a lot of these conversations. If anyone on the panel wants, or I can turn to you, Secretary General, first too.
Oh, thank you, moderator, and thank you for the question. It's a very difficult question. As we know, there's a lot of politics that is played with regards to Taiwan, and the players are obvious, mainly China, trying to exclude. And let me say this, the involvement of Taiwan in especially the Pacific Islands Forum has been there. They've been within the region for decades. They've been real good partners of the Pacific Islands Forum. Even though they are not dialogue partners, they are very effective development partners. They've contributed very well. I'm not sure how well they are entertained in the ASEAN setup, but I mean, in our part of the world, the Chinese have tried their best to exclude Taiwan in all our meetings, but we have an agreement within the Pacific Islands Forum that was passed by leaders in 1992 to protect Taiwan's involvement in our region. So that is one area and mechanism that we can always fall back on to making sure that Taiwan remains relevant and fully active in our region. We have 18 members at the moment, 18. There's more wanting to come in and to join as full members, but the 18 members, only 3 of them recognize Taiwan diplomatically. And in our region, as another safeguard, the Pacific way, we engage in consensus arrangement of making decisions. Therefore, all those three, their decision matters. And so Taiwan is protected in that manner. The other, you talked about the Strait, Taiwan Strait. We can always continue to dialogue. China deals directly with its diplomatic allies in the region, and they also are very, very active in the Pacific Islands Forum. So we hope that we can keep the line open for discussion and to keep everything cool and calm. Thank you.
Major General, would you like to add anything to that question?
Sorry. I think it's almost the same as the Secretary General for the Pacific Islands Forum. He represents a wide aspect of the Pacific Islands. But looking at from a military perspective, our relationships with Taiwan is posted as a trade mission in Fiji, and as such there are some support and aid that they provide in terms of farming assistance when it comes to some of those social programs that happens in Fiji. In reference to Taiwan Strait and the potential conflict that could eventuate, again, Fiji is a neutral party to this, and with its foreign diplomacy of foreign policy of friends to all and enemies to none. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the next set of questions. Surachani from Thailand.
Thank you. My question is also on Myanmar, similar to Isabella, but it's directed to all panelists. So can you guys please share your wisdom and experience about how crisis management and emergency response can still be carried out when it's becoming clear that the G2G arrangement, just like between the SAC and ASEAN, AHA Center, and also other international organizations, just like Isabella just mentioned, clearly cannot get to the affected population? Thank you.
Ishan Tharoor from the US.
Thank you. Ishan Tharoor from the Washington Post. My question is could be for the whole panel, but I'll direct it towards Minister Beck. We heard Defense Secretary Hegseth this morning talk about how under this administration they're not going to lecture and preach, including about things like climate change. The Pentagon has scrapped its climate defense planning initiatives that it came about earlier. I'm just wondering, from your perspective north of the border, what sort of impact does this retreat from climate in the defense space, at least by the United States, have for greater efforts of coordination around these crises?
Win Lu from China.
Thank you, host. When I begin my question, I want to clarify a very common knowledge and common sense on Taiwan. As a very important part of the international order after World War II, Taiwan belongs to China and returns to homeland China, for your information. And my question goes to Major General Mirza. Maybe your presentation has a touch of the question, and as we observe, crises in the Asia-Pacific region often have unique historical and cultural backgrounds and complex entangled interests, and simply transplanting crisis management models from other regions may not be suitable. When a crisis arises within the region, is it more effective for the neighboring countries that know the locals' situation best to take the lead in solving it, or is there a need to involve other countries? How can a balance be found between maintaining openness and utilizing the regional wisdom and mechanisms? Thank you.
So we had 3 questions on, one to the panel on Myanmar, one to Minister Beck, and one to General Mirza. Perhaps starting with the first one on Myanmar, if anyone on the panel would.
Thank you. I think good to reiterate what many of us in the room feel about deep concern about the continued airstrikes, the lack of support for humanitarian aid, the restrictions that are in place, and even the planned elections in the midst of intensifying conflict. These are not the actions of a responsible regime, so it's very important to maintain the pressure on the regime from the international community, continue to urge for de-escalation and inclusive dialogue to address this crisis, speaking of crisis management here in the room. But we very much support ASEAN's centrality, ASEAN's very important role and continued engagement on Myanmar, including the 5-point consensus. This is the kind of work that must continue, this dialogue that can reach the leaders in Myanmar, and we encourage member states to maintain the downgrade of Myanmar to non-political representation at ASEAN meetings. It's just another thing that they can do to avoid legitimizing the current regime. And we must all continue to support the organizations which are capable of delivering humanitarian aid and make sure that they are robust and well-resourced themselves to be able to deliver in this very difficult and frankly dangerous situation. I can answer the Washington Post question at the same time since I have the mic. Thank you. Thank you. So I guess there are two parts to what Secretary Hegseth and indeed the U.S. administration has been saying. So one on response to climate change disasters, if that means that the United States government is likely to be less responsive, I think then it's incumbent on all of us to step up more importantly to be able to deliver where there is a gap, because of course we're not going to abandon our friends and partners wherever they may be on the planet who need assistance. From a strictly defense perspective, we cannot ignore the impact of climate change on the kinds of defense systems that we will need in the future. I mentioned the role of climate in the north of Canada and the different kinds of infrastructure we need to build as a result. I think that's very true here in the Pacific in terms of defense installations on small islands. They are going to have to change. The way that we build, the sorts of technology that we are innovating, that we are delivering, both at home and across the Pacific and indeed in other parts of the world. Weather patterns are changing. We need to adapt how we fly, how we sail. So pretty much every aspect of how we deliver our defense systems at home and abroad are going to have to change, and that's just a fact. So how we deal with it, I think, will depend on the country and their specific goals, but there's no question that it's unavoidable.
Secretary General on
Yes.
Myanmar. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just say something about the climate disaster response. In the Pacific, that's one thing that we're grappling with, and we've been grappling with this for years and years, decades. And it's because we're scattered around the Pacific, just so you understand the scenario. And we're hit by cyclones almost every year. And it wipes out the entire island. Infrastructure, farms, and so, and the islands are scattered around. And you talk about PNG, Papua New Guinea. The villages are scattered around in the highlands as well. So the accessibility is very, very difficult already. Likewise on the islands. You can't fly a plane to deliver supplies, humanitarian supplies. The airstrips are all damaged, trees all over the place. There's no drinking water. These are low-lying islands. So what do? We've been planning, Australia has been, as a member of the forum, has done a great deal in trying to work a system that can be quick to respond, where they set up a warehouse arrangement with water, with blankets, with all kinds of things, tents and whatnot, and to be closer to the places that are affected. But again, these are difficult to deliver. Planes cannot land. You can't access the difficult terrain, especially when there's flood and there's trees strewed everywhere on the road. You can't access. And what does this mean to the Pacific as a whole? To the Pacific Islands Forum, we had to work out something, how we can best address all these issues. You know why it's so difficult? Because it costs money. Funds are the most important, and these are the ones that inhibit everything that we do. We don't have money. Who's going to provide the water? Who's paying for the water? Who's paying for the delivery? So at the end of the day, these are vulnerable countries that are scattered around the Pacific Oceans, and we need to get to them. So funding is very, very important. And at the end of the day, we have to help ourselves, no one else. So that is why we, in September, will approve a facility that we called our own, is the Pacific Resilience Facility, to help quickly fund these small disaster areas and needs across the region. And there's another thing as well that we need to think about when addressing these issues. It's the speed at which you deliver. For example, one of our members, Vanuatu, still now is still suffering after an earthquake. So how many months? Nearly a year we're approaching. So just keep that in mind, that we're trying to help ourselves in the Pacific, and the PRF, the Pacific Resilience Facility, is one that can help us, help our people, and get money to them, buy the necessary assistance that can be provided at a timely manner. Can I? There's another issue here regarding. Let me see. What's the? And the other thing that maybe I'll end here is the Pacific. We are a culture of respect, and we watch out for each other. And everything that we do, the Bigger Tower Declaration and the Boyd Declaration that was mentioned, these help us to unite us. When the Civil War broke out in Solomon Islands, the Bigger Tower was invoked. And Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, everywhere, Nauru, everyone came to assist. And they are obligated to assist because we made it a family thing, that when someone is in need, everyone comes to their aid. Likewise, COVID-19, as I mentioned in my speech. So yes, we try and combine our efforts, work together. But again, at the end of the day, you must realize it's yourself. You need to help yourself.
Thank you, SG. Major General, did you have any comments on any of the? General Meza.
Thank you. You asked the question about the foreign mechanisms implanted in Asia and Pacific, and you would recall that in my talk also I said that the mechanism, any mechanism implanted into this region from outside will lack local respect and recognition. So when I said that, I also meant because you know that anything which has to be enforced has to have the local understanding, the local culture, and the local sensitivities taken into account. And no one better from within the region is better placed to do that. Having said that, while I would say Asia Pacific has more resilience, is more advanced and developed, this thing is very unfortunate, not available in South Asia. We do not have this luxury available in South Asia. So as you said that in the Asia Pacific, I have also made a recommendation that we need to strengthen the existing bilateral and the regional mechanisms. So when you strengthen those bilateral and regional mechanisms, only then you can avoid anything coming from outside. Because if there will be a void, if there will be a vacuum, and then there will be a crisis, and intrinsically to the region, intrinsically to the countries who are undergoing those crises, if they are not able to manage that, you will always have foreign solutions coming there. So if you have a strengthened, what the Secretary General also, Excellency, said, if you have to do from within yourself. So if you have a strengthened bilateral and regional mechanism available, the outside interference will be minimal or less. As I said, this is more applicable to Asia Pacific, but unfortunately it is not there in South Asia, because South Asia, there is no strengthened bilateral or regional mechanism. The mechanisms are there, SARC is there, other forums are there, SCO, is there, but their focus towards crisis management, to avert a crisis management, is yet not matured and not at that level. So when there is always a crisis, there is a vacuum, and that for that vacuum, compulsorily at time, foreign intervention is there and foreign forces have to come and affect those crises. I hope I've been able to answer the question.
Thank you. Henry Boyd, IISS, United Kingdom.
Thank you very much. I'd say it's a truth to my mind that needs to be acknowledged, perhaps, that for a small but significant number of actors, crisis can be seen not as something to be avoided or an accident or an aberration, but as a potentially valuable or necessary tool for relative advantage. And in those cases, perhaps effective crisis mechanisms, or the potential existence of them, may be seen as a challenge or threat to geopolitical issues or geopolitical advantage. How can we, looking at a group of people trying to design effective crisis mechanisms, take that into account and sort of incorporate that into how we design or present, propose crisis management mechanisms to avoid running into the challenge of them being rejected or being seen as a threat rather than a benefit to the actors being proposed to? Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew DeLew, Young Leader, Australia.
Thank you, Chair. And I recognise this will be a bit difficult given that we've talked about complex crises that are fixed in some way, but what I was kind of interested in your opinions on is whether it would be possible to build a system of crisis management that would be adaptable enough to manage crises where we may struggle to identify a fixed point because of an accumulation of activities within the grey zone. And here I'm thinking of disputed territorial encroachments, cyber implants or attacks, disinformation campaigns, and political interference.
The last question for this round, IISS, Antoine.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for all panelists, followed by one for General Sahir. To all panelists, are there any particular emerging and disruptive technologies which create new promising opportunities for crisis communication and coordination, both in traditional and non-traditional security? To General Sahir, so it's very good to see you again at the Shangri-La Dialogue. On crisis management, you spoke to the need for crisis communication. But to my mind also, what matters is the strategic intent behind actors' behavior in crisis management. In that respect, you talked a little bit about thresholds for escalation. So I want to push you a little further on this and ask you the following. Following the recent conflict with your neighbor, to what extent does Pakistan believe it has achieved a new sound balance between 1, deterrence, 2, defense, and 3, overall strategic stability with India? Particularly, how much of a premium does Pakistan put on preemption and intentional conventional escalation as attractive rationales for Pakistan's options in the future? Thank you.
Big round of questions here. So perhaps with the first one in terms of the effective crisis management when it's used for geopolitical context and advantages, and I believe that was to the panel, if how do we design and how do you approach this challenge when crisis management, which is supposed to be a resolution, is instead used as a tool for geopolitical or political gains? Anyone on the panel, if you'd like to take that question.
Okay, I'll start, but these are hours-long answers, right, if we were to do it properly. So I think I'm going to fall back on that. There's always opportunities in crises. There's always a reason to take advantage of new openings that come available. I think at its most very basic, in designing crisis response, we need to make sure that we can talk to people constantly in the languages that make sense to the recipients in a timely manner. If it's a phone call, if it's an in-person meeting, I'm thinking back to pandemic times where we were trying to find solutions globally and everybody was having Zoom calls, which were far less effective than in-person meetings. And we had to find ways to overcome that as quickly as possible. I think actually it was multilateral meetings that faced the most difficulties because you could not get in a room like this and resolve problems in the way that we used to. So I think that only heightened the need for crisis response to be on the basis of existing trust, right? Existing relationships. So in fact, the kind of work that we're all doing here over these few days may serve us well in a future crisis when we know we can pick up the phone and ring up the head of the Pacific Islands Forum and have a good conversation when it's necessary. The other thing that I would point to in a strange and in fact very sad way is the crisis in the battlefields, the war in Ukraine, and watching how innovation in technology, and especially in uncrewed aerial systems, so drones, and what that has meant to the war itself, and leveraging that sort of very small and relatively inexpensive technology for very significant damage being caused, but equally looking at how we can translate that sort of new technology into civilian response. And we are considering, for instance, in the far north in Canada, using more uncrewed systems to search for people who are lost and to be able to deliver supplies in that sort of situation. You can easily see that transfer into somewhere like Myanmar or indeed other disaster zones. We were talking about Papua New Guinea earlier, or Vanuatu, where humans can't go, but we can certainly send in a drone with a good-sized cargo that can drop food and medicine onto a community that needs it, and not from very high in the sky where it might kill somebody. So I guess what I'm saying is there are many opportunities available in a crisis, and we should think about the best ways to take advantage of those and learn from them and continue to evolve.
Thank you. I'll be just brief, as I've said something about that area. And for the Pacific, I think we have, as I said, we tried our best to try and internalize everything and address it through the forum and other agencies that we have who are implementing agencies. We have a number of different agencies like SPC, environmental, like the SPREP and FFA and many others that we work together in these circumstances. And let me say that when there's a disaster somewhere, the last to attend would be like what you call those Red Cross and all those agencies. Why? Because there's a process they go through. But for us, we've already managed that. We've already decided that we can quickly call on, say, our closest neighbor or their closest neighbor to start assisting each other. As I said earlier, the Pacific, we're quite unique in that way. The Pacific way is to help each other. And it's a family arrangement. And we, as I said too, that the money, it involves money. It involves funds. And our region don't have that, okay? So people will suffer, of course, if we don't do anything ourselves as a region, as a group, as neighbors. So the crisis, technology, yes, you know, but then again, you have to bring them in. Somebody has to be trained to fly the, you know, these sorts of things. But already, as I said, our biggest, you know, brothers in our region, like Australia and New Zealand, and other partners that want to come in and assist us, they're always there. You know, we always believe in dialogue as well. And there's something that we call, and it's now becoming very, very popular in around the world. It's called a Talanoa session, which is a dialogue session, and that is now becoming more, you know, a trend to resolve any conflict, anything that needs to be discussed. People will come, sit down, and discuss the issue.
General Musa, there was a question to you, but
Yes.
if you want to pick up any of the other questions as well.
Yeah, I'll start by this, but I'd like to make 3 comments before the Honorable Secretary General and the Deputy Defense Minister have already spoken about those things. In my opinion, the first thing is that we need to differentiate a little bit, we all understand, between the crisis management mechanism in a disaster and a crisis management mechanism in a conflict. Because I can give you an example that there could be 2 countries, I would not like to name, they are involved in a persistent conflict. And when it comes to the conflict management of the conflict itself, they are at -50. But in the conflict management of disaster, earthquake, floods, something like this, they may be at +20. So we need to first understand the difference that these 2 mechanisms do not, they necessarily not mutually reinforce each other. My second comment is getting to the specific question what was asked to me. As I said in my talk also, that strategic understanding must precede the crisis management. Unless you think yourself that you are dominant and you do not want to speak from the position of equality, there's a trust vacuum and there are no respect for the red lines, there are systemic asymmetries, then I think the crisis management is of no use, I would say. And secondly, what I said also that conflict prevention is better than conflict firefighting. What actually happens when there's no conflict and a dispute or a persistent issue is at hand, it goes under the table and it is not discussed at all. And suddenly there is a crisis which comes up and then the world or the international community becomes aware of that. I'll just give you an example of Kashmir. For example, when there is no crisis, Kashmir is never discussed. And as we always say that it is the Kashmir dispute resolution in line with the aspirations of the people of Kashmir and in line with the UNSC resolutions that will address many issues. The core that resides between Pakistan and India is Kashmir. So unless we do not enter into dispute resolution, conflict resolution, it can be through initially conflict management and then leading to the conflict resolution. But if we don't start at it, and then what you witnessed just recently, the crisis, it will always erupt. We will remain hostage to one incident and we will be back to zero from where we started. So these are the 2 fundamentals we need to draw before we move forward on any discussion. Coming over to your question related to deterrence, balance, and strategic stability. At the end of whatever ceasefire which has now taken place and has been affected, if I say in the deterrence domain, while at the conventional level, you know, between 2 contiguous nuclear powers or any 2 nuclear powers, notion of deterrence is very important because it provides stability. So whenever deterrence is disturbed, it has to be reestablished. So in this case, when the deterrence was disturbed, when the Indians conducted the missile strikes and did the kinetic actions here. So that disturbed the deterrence stability, and we had to restore the deterrence. And remaining within the conventional domain, we reestablished the deterrence and tried to achieve that balance. Strategic stability is an overarch. So strategic stability is still disturbed. Strategic stability hinges on three basic fundamentals. The first thing is the conflict resolution, what I said, and the reality that both contiguous nuclear powers exist with conventional forces sitting eyeball to eyeball. So unless you do not go to the conflict resolution, you will be back to zero every time. What has fundamentally altered in this 96 hours conflict? Let me tell you why I spoke about the thresholds. The threshold of what we say conventional warfare has significantly degraded. You are very well aware about the conflict. The history of conflict as it goes, whenever it has occurred at less 71 and 65, it was always confined to the disputed territory. This time it has transcended that and come to the international border. Now that has a different connotation. And the second basic fundamental change which has come, that instead of targeting the borders first, which used to be the conventional domain or erstwhile domain, the cities have been targeted and the borders have relatively remained, if not silent, comfortable. So when you have directly targeted the cities and when you have crossed the threshold of disputed territory into the international border, this has significantly lowered the threshold. And when you combine it with the absence of crisis management mechanism, what we have been talking about, and then the role of media, which I would say has been jingoistic, and the leadership's mindset, whatever we say, now this actually adds to that danger. And what I want to convey here, that while at this point and this crisis, the international community has been able to come in, because had there been no third-party mediation, it would have gone to the next levels. So the third party, that is the US, with UK, with Turkey, with China, with UAE, with KSA, the interlocutors, they came in and affected that ceasefire. With the lowering of this, I'm now talking about the strategic stability, with the lowering of this threshold to the dangerous levels, if next time such a conflict occurs and the cities are targeted first and the borders become irrelevant mostly, so what you will see is that there could be a chance, I'm not trying to create an alarm, but I'm speaking based on logic, that there could be a possibility that before the international community intervenes, because of the restricted or constricted times window, the damage and destruction may have already taken place. So this should worry the international community, that the thresholds have a direct impact on the strategic stability. And the thresholds, the new paradigms which have been established, are not the erstwhile. And somebody mentioned here about the technology also. The technology has also outpaced certain traditional cardinals of conflict. So all this, when you combine it together, that adds to the questions on strategic stability in South Asia. I hope I've been able to.
Major General, would you like to take any of the questions, perhaps also from Australian grey zone and political interference, or any of the ones that you'd like to?
Well, I think a lot has been said already, and I'll try and keep mine as simple as possible. But I agree that in most cases, many mechanisms has been designed to deal with the aftermaths of conflicts or natural disasters, rather than looking at the prevention of how things could evolve into. So being proactive is very important, and it's something as part of the Pacific Response Group is trying as much as possible, whilst being unique in the Pacific way, in reaching out to the various communities is something that is very important for us, creating that awareness, trying to build that level of resilience and trust within those communities so that they can, as much as possible, not to do things that would put them in harm's way. There is something that we do as charged within the Pacific Response Group, is always maintaining our communications open throughout the months, and there's always those monthly discussions that we have, which keeps us informed of things that are happening around us and what we can do to help each other in terms of the responsibilities of the Pacific Response Group. But when it comes to emerging technology, again, this is a concern when you have artificial intelligence taking control of social media. And when you're looking at general communities, populations within the Pacific, being very much reliant on social media, again, these things have a very, very bad influence and can create a lot of uncertainty and animosity within the communities within the Pacific itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer Pratap from IISS.
Thank you, Darshana. I have a couple of questions for so bear with me. Major General and Secretary General, I was curious to hear your thoughts on, you've both mentioned how funds can be a bit of an issue, and I have to imagine that there are also personnel issues. So I'm wondering if you can share some of your experiences on building resilience within your communities. I think I'm thinking to cable disruptions and the duration that sometimes those cable repairs might take, and similarly in disaster relief where you'll have hundreds of incidents to respond to and very few people that can engage. And as a second part of the first question, whether there's a willingness to engage and use new technology and whether you're actively considering the risks of such technologies that might come to bear. And second to Minister Beck, when it comes to the climate crisis and indeed crisis in general, I'm wondering what you see as the role of the private sector beyond thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
From Fiji, young leader Semi Taylor.
Thank you. My question is addressed to Major General Kaloniwaisa. Given the increasing complexity of regional crises, such as the rising HIV outbreak in Fiji, this is fueled by drug trafficking that has been happening, and practices like the Bluetoothing along natural disasters such as flooding in the Western Division. How is the RFMF adopting its crisis management strategies to effectively coordinate with regional partners, mostly such as Australia and New Zealand, to address security and public health challenges while ensuring the protection of Fiji's national sovereignty and public safety? Pinaka.
Final question from Melinda Martinez, Indonesia.
Thanks, Chair. My question is specifically for Deputy Minister Beck and Secretary General Waka. Since you mentioned a lot about disaster management, I'm just wondering if you think that, because in this region, we think that a lot of governments see disaster prevention or management as a cost center, right? So I just want to seek your perspective about the role of the private sector, particularly financial institutions and insurance, in helping to alleviate the government burden for disaster prevention. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the panelists for the questions asked, but I'll also invite you to perhaps offer your closing remarks and any thoughts on this as after you've answered the specific questions. Minister Beck, begin.
Thank you. My mind went straight to insurance too. And interesting on the private sector response. So what drives private sector to assist more than they would traditionally? You might think of the role of the private sector is cost, is ultimately a cost for business, a lack of clients for your business because they have been driven away from the region, the neighborhood because of climate disasters. I'm thinking of housing in particular, and in Canada we have a challenge like in many other countries with building houses on floodplains and wildfire disaster areas, so where people can no longer live, can no longer have a livelihood. Insurance rates have gone up astronomically and therefore communities are moving out, and therefore rural areas and other parts of the country are losing populations, and therefore lifestyles and livelihoods are changing significantly. So I think those are big drivers for the private sector to become more involved in prevention, in providing assistance and advice, and certainly the big insurance companies in Canada are working hard with homeowners to explain how you protect your house from floods or from fires, in addition to making it really expensive to get the insurance, and so driving people in that direction. Where government can assist, in our country there are different levels, of course, of government, federal, provincial, but also municipal. And where there are more regulations around where you can build and what the fire safety standards might be, for instance, those are also drivers of change, both for regular humans in how they decide what it is they do in their choices of building or living in certain areas, and also what sorts of businesses can come forward to be of assistance. And I think the other big one from the private sector is demonstrating how much their own assistance is appreciated. You know, there has to be a kind of risk reward in that. And when they're seen to be good contributors to society, and that is seen as frankly good marketing for their products, and they are available, for instance, when there's a crisis underway and food or beverages need to be shared, medical supplies, when private sector is coming forward with free donations, they're getting free marketing, frankly, and they're building their brand awareness for the future, and that can only be a good thing for the business itself. So there's a variety of angles in all of that, but absolutely essential to have private sector part of disaster response.
Thank you. I just want to just say that during disasters, the businesses, you know, the private sector suffer a great deal as well. These are bigger, even bigger, more established private sectors like communication. You know, those are, their towers get blown down. And it's funny because they help themselves first. They'll get their business back up. And in the Pacific, they are part of the community, okay? So they are obligated by they do help. And many a times the government, through their legislations and policies, obligate businesses to assist. But how can you assist when your shop depends on imports from Australia, from outside? You run out of water, you run out of everything, and you cannot. The private sector in other parts of the world, they can take supplies from the next town or somewhere else. So these are areas that we're grappling with all the time, problems that we have to think of how to address. And I think the private sector can still do more. I think they have the money, they have the resources, and they can in the Pacific, they do partner with the government. For example, if there's a impending cyclone or something, you get your warning from your cell phone. They'll warn you. So they do work together in those cases. And if there's any requirements for health and things like that, they go out of their way as well. So there's this partnership arrangement that is always available, always strong in the Pacific. It's the way we deal and respect each other. One other thing that was asked here as well is the use of technology. I think I mentioned a little bit about that. And again, we welcome all that. There is always a space for technology that can work in environments like the villages and low-lying islands as well. You know, electricity, when the grid is out, there's nothing else it can do. The hospitals are down. Everything is down. So maybe solar, wind, and things like that can go a long way as well. And they are using it as well. Yes. Thank you.
Major General, your floor is yours.
Thank you. Just on the funding part, when it comes to looking at the defense aspect within the Pacific Response Group, we're quite fortunate because we have a defense arrangement in partnership with the Australians and the New Zealanders. So for small countries such as Fiji, Tonga, and Papua New Guinea, small militaries, we are, but Australia and New Zealand does provide a lot in terms of capabilities, in terms of having those strategic lift capabilities that on ships and airplanes as well, that takes us and deploys us to various regions that are in crisis or under natural disaster as well. Again, there are use of technologies such as drones that are deployed to areas that are unreachable. And they provide a lot in terms of information and data that is required for us. The deployment of the Pacific Response Group is first of all deployed with a Pacific Special Advisory Team that consists of members of all of these militaries that actually do a lot of awareness, do a lot of situational awareness prior to the deployment of the main body. So that assists us a lot in terms of what we do and how we respond to the various crises that happens within the Pacific. When it comes to the question regarding the drug pandemic, the HIV, and also natural disaster within Fiji, the RFMF, Republic of Fiji Military Forces, is part of the National Disaster Management Organization. Again, they play the lead role when it comes to these typical disasters. Each particular crisis is handled by the respective lead agency. And as such, the RFMF provides a lot of support. Unfortunately, the legislation in Fiji does not allow the Republic of Fiji Military Forces to take a lead role in the fight against drugs, in the fight against HIV. But what we do is we do a lot of training and a lot of discussions with the lead agencies, the Fiji Police Force in terms of the drug pandemic in Fiji, HIV, and COVID-19 with the medical infrastructure back home in Fiji as well. So as much as what the Secretary General has indicated, though we're limited in resources, limited in funding, but we try as much as possible to reach out and do as much as we can. So preventative is a huge thing for us, building that resilience, building that trust within communities to help them understand what is out there, what can happen to them in terms of natural disasters is very important. And again, at the same time, deploying teams that can actually look out and see what is in the horizon would certainly help these communities understand and have a much more better picture of what's happening around them. Thank you.
Well, one of the traditions that we honor at IISS is ending discussions on time. I am just 2 minutes above it, but it was a rich set of discussions and varying themes. If you have more questions for any of the panelists, please do catch them on the sidelines of the Shangri-La dialogue. We heard different perspectives, different priorities, different experiences, and certainly competing interests. But please join me this evening in thanking my panelists and thank you to all of you for your time and for sharing with us your perspectives and experiences and your thoughts on such a complex and complicated set of questions and issues. Thank you so much. Thank you.